today's video, we're going to be taking a look again here at this modeled guidance, taking a look here at the European model, even the GFS model. We'll probably get into some temperature anomalies a little bit later on. That's going to be exciting to take a look at here. First things first, I mean, looking right away at kind of this afternoon, which is going to be probably when you're seeing this video, we do have a strong low here over kind of Canada, right near the Great Lakes there, and we can see there is a cold front extending down from this low right there, a bit of a warm front as well here. This is causing surging warm air up the east. We've talked about this for a few days now. It's finally here. We see a lot of folks reaching into the 60s, even 70s today along the eastern seaboard, as this warm air is kind of squeezed, causing it to really peak up pretty far north. We are going to see this swinging cold front behind it though, so later this evening, for a lot of us, there is going to be these thunderstorms and showers reaching the eastern seaboard by the time we're reaching again this evening, and that is going to bring the colder air behind it, which we see right here. It's right there right now, but it is going to be centered over the east eventually. Now, as we move this on towards this evening, there we go. There's the thunderstorms and showers along the east coast. Here is the cold air rushing in, as you can see. And even by the time we're reaching just Saturday afternoon, it's pretty much going to be here. And especially into Saturday evening, we can tell we're in a pattern that looks a bit like this. So the cold is pretty much centered like this, so a lot of these areas will be spared a little bit. I think it's mostly this pocket here that's going to be the coldest. We do see hardly any activity, really. I think there's some here, some showery activity with 1,004 millibar low pressure center over British Columbia there. I really don't see this as a very active coming few days after that cold front comes through, until we see a more major system develop here by the time we're reaching Wednesday, Tuesday into Wednesday. So we have a little bit of a ways to go here. 995 millibar low pressure center over Nevada. We are seeing cold air rush down the west coast, causing snowfall again for the Sierra Nevadas there, where a lot of ski resorts, the ski lifts, the snow is getting all the way up to the tops of the ski lifts. Definitely, feet and feet and feet, 10, 15, 20 feet of snowfall accumulated in some of these huge mountains out there. Very similar to the year that the Donner Party had when they moved through this same area. I can only imagine that this is about the same. There is a story about the Donner Party where they actually had to make a fire. They were somewhere in between where they were at the Donner camp, or whatever they called that thing, the cabin, near that lake. I forget exactly what it was called, but they were somewhere on the tops of the mountain trying to make it into the Sacramento Valley. And they actually made a fire on a log that had fallen, a fallen tree. They used to do that very often, actually. And the snow is so deep that to stay near the fire, they ended up being like 5, 10, 15 feet deep below the snow in what you could only imagine as like just a straight down hole with a fire down below it, because it was obviously melting below, and they just continued to have to stay near this fire to stay warm with minimal amounts of food. Just terrible situation. But that gives you an idea of how deep the snow was that year, back in the 1840s, was it? And then we see obviously now similar accumulations in these mountains this year in 2023, some almost 200 years later. Very interesting stuff. I love that story. I love reading books about it. And it's really just so interesting, the weather history behind all of it, I think. So that's probably why I'm so interested in it. Obviously a tragic story. Let's keep going with this though. We see that snow continues to accumulate. Just a little bit of a side story there. By Wednesday afternoon, March 22nd, we do see these snow showers continuing throughout the Sierra Nevadas and into the Rockies here by this point. But what we see happening by the time we're reaching later in the week is we pretty much have a bit of a ridge developing here in the east. So things should be looking nicer in the east eventually here as we're reaching into mid to late week. We can anticipate that. We see some cold air damming back behind. So definitely a very interesting scenario there. We see things getting even warmer in the east by the time we're approaching the weekend. So Friday the 21st or 24th there, better yet. We have these pretty broad low pressure systems here. Some precipitation in between there. And then we're seeing again that surging warm air up the east coast here. And then we see really cold air pushing back down for the west. And this is exactly what has to happen for us to return to a very warm pattern in the east. And it looks like this is going to happen from Friday there. And then look what happens here. We see a low developing or kind of taking place here for the Finger Lakes regions of New York. We have a bit of a cold front here and obviously a warm front there. So this will be a very warm day most likely here on Saturday the 25th. And there's not that severe of cold pushing in behind this cold front. It's a pretty weak cold front, matter of fact. We could have some thunderstorms and heavy showers along that just because of how warm it is. But there isn't that much Arctic air behind it. And matter of fact, we actually see the cold kind of not following it. And we see another low developing in the middle portion of the country again with a look like this. So that warm is going to be surging once again here by the time we're reaching early that next week, kind of the 25th through 27th, 28th, 29th time frame. This one, though, is kind of looking like it might have more Arctic air behind it. It needs to be watched very closely. Now, the total precipitation here, as you can see, tells the full story. We see these storms moving onshore to the west here. We have seen this all wintertime long with basically no stop. And then we see a lot of these storms moving through these areas here, a couple offshore as well. But really the flow looks something like this, which tells me that the jet stream for the most part is going to be looking a lot like this, with the deepest cold over the central United States for a majority of the model run. Some warm air able to make its way up the east coast at times, some ridging in the west at times, some troughing as we saw, but that's generally the next 10 days. Now the total snowfall here, as you can see, a lot out west and not a lot in the east, again indicating that we're going to move back into a air mass just like this. We can literally see on the snowfall map, and we can just see tons and tons of snowfall here across the Sierra Nevadas into the Southern Rockies and the Four Corner states here. Definitely very extreme amounts, and we actually have pretty heavy amounts up here in the upper Midwest as well. But really the east is slowing down from the snowfall that we had over the last couple of weeks, actually significantly slowing down, and this is probably it for the entire winter of 2022 to 2023 there. Very interesting. Now the GFS model, we get some agreement. Obviously, we have our cold front roll through with that low up in Canada. As we continue on here, we get that second low. But again, in this case, the cold doesn't really come with it, and we actually see a rising storm across the central United States, just like we saw in that European model. So we see something like this take place after that low, so more warm air surging up the east. So we have great agreement here on the models. And let's see what happens after this, because the GFS model does go further. And look at that, we do get Arctic air again, just like this, something like that, as we have our low right here. So that's kind of the cold front here probably, and probably quite a bit of Arctic air moving in at this point. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. As we continue on, we see a ridge moves in very promptly for the 30th of March, and we have something like this, which would again be a very warm look here for the east. Definitely what I'm taking away there. And then we get pretty mild air and maybe another ridge becoming a thing here around the 2nd through 3rd of April. So maybe a warm end to March, warm start to April kind of is the look here. So we'll have to wait and see. The European ensemble model here, which we'll take a look at for the temperature anomalies, has that warm obviously over the next day and a half. And then that very cold Arctic air moves in for quite a while. But we get this warming trend, especially as we approach the weekend, just like we saw in the European and GFS model, where this warm air is able to surge northward here for a lot of these areas for Friday through Sunday, basically. Then we have a lot of cold air moving down the west. So this would encourage a jet stream pattern just like this. Pretty much what we've shown all video. We do see some cold air, I don't know why I just said it that way, cold air able to make its way in for Monday here on the 27th. So this cold starts to really spread eastward eventually. And really what we're going to be seeing is what I think is dominantly a cold pattern out west. Like this frame, for instance, kind of tells the full story. We still see this significantly below average temperatures here, which in general is going to encourage warmer air anyway in the east. But we do see some cold at times on this model, like it's showing a little bit of blue. But what I think this is we have many models here. An ensemble model is going to be about 20 to 30 models, or what we call members. But they're a little bit different from each other, so they're not going to show the same thing, obviously. And what we see here is almost all of them showing cold in the west, and then probably what's happening is some of them are showing cold in the east, some of them are showing warm in the east, and that's why we have this very, what I've always called averaged outlook, where it's just very average, and that's not usually how things go. So we're gonna have to wait and see. It's up for discussion, and that's why you should subscribe, because we do upload every single day, and we are gonna get to the bottom of all of this. So we'll go over it every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Like the video if you enjoyed it, by the way, and leave a comment down below because it helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in the next video.